Welcome to Ptolus, Tales Under the Spire. We are doing parts 4 and 5 today. If you haven't listened to parts 1 through 3, that's 2 that you can watch prior to this so that you can catch up in the story, or you can just start with us right here and now. Vo had quite a distance to walk, and the sun had faded fast to barely an orange glow on the horizon, but she made it to the famous Delver's Square and entered the Ghostly Minstrel. An inn and a pub and a restaurant, all in one, the Ghostly Minstrel was the adventurer's meeting place of choice. It had earned a reputation as the central feature of Delver's Square and the focal point in the world of the Delvers who plumbed the depths below the city. On its second and third floors, the inn actually had a total of 30 guest rooms. A night's stay at the Ghostly Minstrel could cost 6 silver pieces, all the way up to 2 gold pieces, depending on the room size and location. Keeping a horse overnight in the stables behind the inn cost an additional 5 silver pieces, but very few people rode horses in Ptolus. Tellith was a pretty young woman with reddish-brown hair and was working the front desk when Vo entered. Before entering the place, Vo found a nice hidden place to make up a disguise. Nothing too elaborate, but enough to change her overall look from when she had met Sala the first time. Sliding into the pub, Vo moved with finesse to the counter where the woman awaited her. "Excuse me, miss. I'm here seeking someone about a job. Who would I need to talk to?" Tellith responded, "Well, hello, and welcome to the Ghostly Minstrel. I'm Tellith, the manager, and you would talk to me, but we're very, very busy tonight. If you could come back in the morning, that would be a much better time to discuss. Did you want a table or a room tonight?" "Well, hello, Tellith. I'm pleased to meet you. I will see about coming back in the morning. I think I would like to have a table and a room, actually. Is there any entertainment tonight?" Vo asked as she studied the woman and looked into the place to see how everything looked. The tap room had a minstrel named Taran Ursulado performing and entertaining customers. Talon is an amazing draw, particularly to the female clientele. He had that magnetic sort of charm in addition to his fabulous good looks. Tonight was no exception. The tables and booths were all packed. Tellith said that they did have a room available, but Vo must pay for the night ahead of time because there was so much demand. Hearing the name Talon, Vo smiled, and great memories were brought back of the fine specimen. "Yes, I would definitely like to have a room. I will take the best one you have available. Can I get a seat close to the stage, please?" "Absolutely. 2 thrones gold, and you will have our finest rooms. You might have a fight to get the closest, though." She smiled politely and took Vo's coin. Vo handed over 2 gold and an extra 2 for the closest seat. Vo was certain the manager could get it for her with enough gold offered. Tellith took the 2 gold and motioned for Vo to follow her. She went to the frontmost table and spoke quietly to the patrons there, a human man and woman. Vo saw the red-haired woman drop a throne on their table, and they happily gave up their seat and headed through the crowd to the bar. Now the beautiful woman had the table all to herself. With a smile to the couple that gave up their seat to her, Vo took her seat and ordered a nice fruity wine, some bread, and cheese. Then she settled in to enjoy the show. Talon was regaling the crowd with a thick-bodied guitar while singing several tunes common to the area. Many of the patrons, much longer into the drink than others, were singing along loudly. Most everybody was having a great time. The bard occasionally did a hand flourish and threw sparks into the air, or produced a flower to hand to a beautiful lass that disappeared into the air. The room was getting along pretty well, but it seemed that Talon, while playing marvelously, the charm about him, that he was also using a few minor spells to woo the crowd. Vo decided to join in the festivities and cast a simple spell of her own. She cast a grand image of men and women dressed in ball attire, dancing among the tables and the clientele. The images danced to the music and the tunes Talon was playing. It was quite a performance indeed. Vo at one point even tossed Talon quite the smile and a lick of her lips as she had made eye contact. She was in disguise, but it was one of a pretty young lass. Her hair, not the stark black as before, was now a playful blonde with curls. Her attire was that of a high class, but not a noble, as that would have been hard to copy and play off. A few people stood in alarm at the appearance of the images, but they quickly calmed, realizing the playful nature that were simply going along with the performance. Everyone was clapping along to the fast tunes Talon was strumming out, and watched both he and the conjured images. A handful of couples stood and joined the illusions in playful dance, and the whole crowd was roaring with laughter, clapping, and music. As the night wore on, Talon slowed down the pace and brought the volume down. He seamlessly switched to a small harp, and his fingers made the strings twinkle. The room was filled with a calming air that lifted everyone's spirits and lightened their hearts. Many headed upstairs to rooms, while others left for home. A few had to be roused from their tables and politely helped upstairs or outside. As the middle of the night approached, the common room emptied. Once things were calm and most of the people had left, Vo clapped her hands to Talon when he looked at her. She had enjoyed his playing, and so did many others. Vo's spells added playfulness to the whole thing. It was a good night indeed, and she hoped it would be better soon. "That was some fine playing, Talon," she said to the man as he strummed on the harp softly. "What do you think of the dancers that joined in the merriment? I thought it was a nice touch." "Ah, as did I, lass, as did I." He carefully packed away his instruments as he spoke to Vo. "You're the last to leave, pretty. What has you staying so late?" He flashed that impossibly charming smile at her as he finished his packing and stands to address Vo. Vo fake blushed at the pretty comment and said, "I wanted to have a chance to speak with you after you were done. I hope that's okay. You played so well, I had to see with whom you studied under. I also have a room here. Matter of fact, it's one of the best. Do you care to join me and we can speak there?" "Oh, no one in particular, beautiful. I have traveled extensively and I've lived a long life learning many things. But, of course, I would be happy to join you." He lifted his hand and asked for another bottle of the same wine Vo had sitting on the table. He accepted that and 2 glasses, then followed Vo where she led. Vo led the man up to her room. Once inside, she took a look around the place, examining the interior to ensure that they were not only alone, but that everything was secure. "Excuse me while I slip into something a little more comfortable." She went behind a changing wall and began to dismantle her disguise and place things where they normally would be. She then walked back around the wall and said, "So, what do you think?" Her voice returned to her normal one as well. Of course, it had been probably 5 years since they last saw each other, but she doubted he would have forgotten. Talon rocked back on his heels. "Vo? I haven't seen you in years," he chuckled out loud. "Why the disguise?" With a giggle of her own, Vo shared, "I'm being secretive because I'm actually on a scouting mission. I'm looking for someone and they told me about meeting Ptolus to give her information. What do you know about her? I was just going to give her some information, but when I heard you were playing here tonight, I had to stay and get reacquainted." She said the last bit with a grin. "Oh, not much. Teleth pays me some coin to entertain the crowd. She runs the inn while Zaid runs the bar, and her father manages some theater or something up in Old Town." Vo curled up on the divan next to Talon and poured the wine into the 2 glasses he had brought up with him. "Have you heard of a woman named Sala, by chance?" "No, that name doesn't ring a bell, but, I mean, honestly, there's 1,000 beings. No, there are thousands of beings in Ptolus." "That's true," Vo said, and then she took a long sip from her wine as she eyed Talon. Fade to black. The morning dawned, but barely, as the duo awakened to the sound of hard falling rain beating against the window and the roof. Talon stretched in the bed and turned over to embrace Vo. Vo stirred, and she gave a faint moan and opened her eyes to see him. "Looks like the weather has turned for the worse. Might have to stay in bed all day." "What a shame," she said with a pout. "Where are you off on your next adventure?" "I just returned myself after a year away from Ptolus." Talon shook his head. "I just came in from off the road as well. The ghostly minstrel has been making me enough coin to keep me rooted for a little while." "Well, since we'll be here for a while, would you mind meeting again soon?" Vo shot him a disarming smile. It was an honest question and not one in which she was just looking for a night like last night, though that would be nice. She genuinely liked him, and he was of the same heart, or at least she thought so. "I really must be going now, though. As I told you, I'm on a tiny mission, so to say." She crawled out of bed, pulling the blanket along with her. Then she moved to the changing wall and began to put on the same costume as before. "I'm here almost every night," said Talon. "Come by any time." He watched Vo dress with a smile that didn't leave his face. Vo finished with her dressing and moved over to give Talon a long kiss, and then she headed out the door. She shared, "I just have the room for the night, so you may have to go at some point, unless you've got to choose a room for yourself. If so, why not keep this one? You can change, and then I'll see you this evening." With that, she headed out the door and back to the front desk to Teleth. "Greetings again, ma'am. I was talking with Talon, and I brought up a name to see if he knew it. He didn't, but I thought you might be able to help me. I'm looking for a woman by the name of Sala." Yes, ma'am. I know of her. She doesn't come here as much as she used to, but she's around quite often." Vo said, with a worried look on her face, "I'd like to have a word with her about something. Any idea of when she usually comes in? It's a rather delicate matter." "Oh, I'm sorry, miss, but I don't know at all. She's usually around every week or so, but it's been a few days since I've seen her, so maybe it'll be soon? If I may have your name, I can tell her you're looking for her. Will you be staying here again so I can tell her your room number?" "Thank you very much. Actually, you can give her a message. Vo is here with information regarding Inleos. After further investigation, including searching his premises, nothing can be found that could link Inleos to the manufacture of magical items. As for staying, I will not, but thank you very much for your hospitality, Vo stated, and then she left the premises. Tellith's eyebrows climbed into the air with the statement and watched Vo, in disguise, leave the common room. Now we will be moving on to part 5 of Chapter 1. As Vo left that morning and headed out into Delver Square, she was nearly overwhelmed by the number of beings and activity in the square. The statue stood tall over the fountain and entrance to the Undercity. A constant flow of bodies up and down the stone stair resembled a hurricane, but instead of water swirling, it was people. Every race in the Empire was represented here and tolerated. Humans, elves, dwarves, gnomes, halflings, as well as orcs, minotaurs, and even more Vo couldn't identify on sight. One wizard even floated down out of the sky. Apparently walking was too pedestrian for him. He touched down in an area that opened as those saw him descend. He quickly walked into Myreth Soddides. Vo made her way through the press into the halfway house. No one greeted her there. A few men sat around the rough tables drinking coffee, while a steady stream were leaving rooms out the back, presumably headed to work. Vo was still in disguise. She walked to the bar and asked, "Is breakfast still being served, or am I too late?" The man behind the counter grunted and said he could whip up something. "Oh, I appreciate your enthusiasm. Your generosity is most appreciated, and my tummy thanks you. The ride-in yesterday was long on the road. Are you able to help me get a room? One that perhaps faces the square? I think I have a few days before I have to leave again." Vo could see the man was busy, but she would take whatever he offered. The man grunted again at her sarcasm, then gruffly told her all his rooms were open since the caravans pulled out that morning. She could have her pick. It's a silver if she wanted to share, and 2 if she didn't. Vo tossed a gold piece up and said, "Well, that'll be good for 5 days then. Thank you." She then took a seat to await her food. He snatched the coin, bit it, and then pocketed it very quickly. A moment later, he slid her plate in front of her at the table with a mug of light ale. Taking the plate of food and the mug of ale, Vo moved to a table and quickly ate. Once finished, she headed upstairs to a room with a view of the ghostly minstrel. There she waited out the day. If nothing eventful happens, then she changed into a different disguise and headed to the minstrel. The woman Sala did not appear in the duration of time that Vo watched, though. The food at the wagon wheel was nowhere near as good as the minstrel's, but it was palatable fare. The minstrel wasn't yet busy, and Talon hadn't started performing. Few people populated the tables of the bar this early in the evening. Ptolus was not there greeting guests, so Vo had her pick of table locations. Since Ptolus wasn't there, Vo went ahead and picked a table that would give her a view of the front door and the table where Talon was normally behind. When the waitress came over, Vo told her that she wanted some fresh meat and potatoes and whatever fresh vegetables they had along with a light wine. Vo found boredom quickly, but little else as the day wore on. Tellith moved around the area, getting ready for that evening again. She was having areas cleaned and straightened, as well as fussing over several details. She did greet the disguised Vo once as she was bustling about, thanking her for her patronage. The fire was kept small because of the warm weather. The rain put a small chill in the air, but the dozens of bodies would heat the room up quickly. Talon popped in and set up the stage, preparing for the night. He laid out the few instruments he could use, then he too ordered dinner and a light wine. He looked in Vo's direction, but no recognition crossed his face as he sat and ate alone. He sat and sipped his wine as more people milled in. The crowd was rowdy tonight. Apparently a group of delvers came up with something, and they were anxious to spend their coin after offloading the spoils. Vo had taken her time with the food that was brought to her, and when Talon came in and ordered, she could tell that he hadn't seen through her disguise. When the delvers came in and began to drink and eat and get rowdy, Vo had a plan to attain some extra coin this night. She would watch carefully and pick those out that seemed not only way too drunk, but also not as attentive. Many items on many people glowed with magic, from armor to weapons, as well as rings, headband, amulets, and more. There was no shortage of magic in that room. The delvers Vo were concentrating on had several magical items about their person, but it was clear they kept nothing brought up from the other city. They seemed to have sold everything for coin. Vo found lots of nice items about the people gathered, but it seemed that they were all together, and that would make any pilfering difficult. She decided to just enjoy the show, staying once again till the end as she did the night prior. The group got rowdy and threw quite a bit of coin around that night, but nothing got too out of hand. They were quite popular by the end after buying everyone ale and wine. The point passed the middle of the night, and passed and everyone started flittering upstairs or out with residual laughter, lubricated by libations. Talon put on quite the show with a fresh flourish of flashy spells, much to the delight of everyone present, the ladies especially. Soon the common room was nearly empty, and the bard was preparing to leave as well. Vo sat there as Talon put his things away, sipping on an ale she had bought just a bit ago. It was only the third drink of the night for her, as she wanted to keep her wits about her. She waited till he got ready to leave before getting up and following him. Talon noticed his tail and turned to address her. "May I help you?" Recognition alit in his eyes, and he laughed out loud. "Vo, you're in costume again?" Vo's eyes lit up as Talon recognized her. "Yes, as I said, I'm on a little mission, and the disguises aid me. So do you have a room here, or somewhere else? I would think by all the gold you make the place that you would have a free room by now." The bard chuckled and explained that he kept her room from the night before. "Would you care to join me again tonight?" With a smile, Vo said, "I would thoroughly enjoy it. Thank you for the invitation." Another wonderful night passed, then morning dawned with the two together again. Vo woke this time with a fulfilling feeling. Talon, too, had a blissful look about him as he slept. She had been up for about an hour now, just watching him sleep. With not a peep, she dressed and left the room to head downstairs. She grabbed some breakfast and made her way back up to the room, and she woke him by springing on the bed. "Rise and sign, sleepyhead. I brought you some breakfast." Talon yawned and smiled as he stretched and enjoyed breakfast with the beautiful Vo. "How's your little Mitchell going? Do you need any help?" he asked. Not knowing if she could trust him as of yet, Vo thought about it for a moment, but with a far-off look, she stared at a strawberry. "You know of the Dreaming Apothecary and their monopoly on magic item manufacturing? There have been instances I've learned where people have gone missing if they were either found to be making magic items, or sometimes just an accusation alone could have the same result." Vo watched his reaction before continuing. "Well, I have an acquaintance that says with great fervor that he hasn't done anything of the sort. A woman hired me to spy on him and found out the truth, which is he's not making anything. I'm trying to find this woman because I want to know exactly whom she is working for." "Oh, I've heard the same about them," said Talon. "No one has challenged them on this, and I suspect no one can. You're not planning to, are you? I would just tell this woman your friend isn't selling the items and see if she's content. You could ask her who she's working for, or follow her, I guess." "Oh, no. I'm not wanting to challenge them on this issue. They are far out of my league for that. I have told the person that I'm supposed to tell about it, and even asked the original woman whom she worked for. Naturally, she was very weary of me asking, and said she worked for no one. She seemed sincere in her words, but she could have been swayed by magic, which I didn't check for at the time. I was wanting to follow her myself, which is why I've been here. She gets information from the manager Telleth. I was to tell her what I found, and so I did. I was just waiting for the woman to show up." "Oh, I understand. Well, you're welcome to spend every night in the inn watching me, then retiring here until you find her." He smiled big, shining all of his white teeth. "I will take you up on that offer. I tell you what, give me something of yours that I can wear with my disguises that will let you know it's me in the audience. It must be something not totally conspicuous, though." Talon looked over his gear and opened his pack to pull out a small gold lapel pin of a harp. This should suffice. Taking a look at the tiny harp, it made Vo smile. The harp was probably his favorite weapon, based on the amount he played it in his shows. She would wear it proudly in the crowd when she watched. "You are generous and thoughtful," said Vo. "Well, I'd better get back to work. Oh, by the way, in case you are out, the woman looks kind of like this," and she gave him a very brief description of Sala. With that, Vo once again jumped off the bed and gave Talon a long, passionate kiss goodbye before getting into the old woman character and then leaving. Vo headed to the same room that she had rented in the halfway house and sat in the window as she did the day prior. Finally, Vo's patience was rewarded. Between the lunch crowd leaving and the dinner crowd starting to arrive, the woman Sala strode across the square toward the bustle and entered the ghostly minstrel. Vo quickly left her room and went down to the plaza. She moved toward the ghostly minstrel and looked for Sala. She wanted to find her and follow her to wherever she would go. Vo pushed and shoved through the crowded Delver Square to get to the minstrel's front door. She composed herself before pushing open and moving off to one side. Sela and Telleth were conversing, and Vo overheard a snippet of their conversation. The red-haired young woman was telling the wizard that Inleos wasn't making magic items. The disguised woman took a seat as nearby as possible without being suspicious, as the two women ended their brief conversation, and Sala left in a huff. As Sala left, Vo left as well. Just before she exited, though, she cast her spell again to change her appearance. When she walked out the door, she looked completely different before. She did this in case Sala had saw her walking in. Vo looked like one of the patrant males from the night before. Once outside, she didn't do any obvious scans of the area, but she looked to see where Sala was headed and then headed off after her. Sala walked straight down Center Street with an angry stomp to her stride and faded after a few blocks and turned into just a fast walk. They quickly left Delver Square behind as they made their way to the South Market District. She passed the Emperor's Road that led up to the Exotic Market and Inleos. The older wizard woman turned down a small street off center and made her way up to a small home. Oblivious to her tales, she opened the lock and entered the home. Now that she knew where the woman lived, or at least where she was currently, Vo changed back to herself and walked up to the door and knocked loudly. She whispered the beginnings of the Heartfire spell and held it ready just in case the woman came to the door with ill intent. A few moments passed, then Selah opened the door. With a harumph, she addressed Vo. "Hello again. I received your message from Teleth. So you're confident he's not selling magic then? What did you base that on? How do I know you're not lying to protect your friend?" "Greetings, Sala. You asked me to investigate. After we met, I went back to the market in a disguise. I followed him after he was finished selling his wares. He went back to a warehouse where he stores his items. He put his things away and went to his house afterward. I went back to the warehouse and looked around checking for hidden compartments and such, but I wasn't able to find anything of the sort. I even went back to his place later that night and got into his home. I checked it for the same as the other place, and I couldn't find anything that would suggest he's making magic items." You just said selling magic items. That goes against what you told me to check. Of course he's selling some items, but they're mostly small items and nothing really expensive. Once I found out that he seemed to be clean, I went to the Ghostly Minstrel and stayed the night. The next day I told Teleth what I discovered, just as you asked. I did it in disguise as well, so you know I'm capable of such things." "Harumph. Yes, I meant making them. Well, fine. I supposed you wanted to be paid then?" She reached into her robe and pulled out a small bag, then counted 10 coins into Vo's hand. "Payment would be good for the trouble I went through, yes. What will happen with Inleos now? He is someone I trust to sell the magic items I find. I hope he doesn't disappear like the others who have been accused of making magic items have," Vo said. "Well, if he's truly doing nothing wrong, then nothing will happen to him." Sala was visibly flustered and frustrated, and she said, almost to herself, "I was so sure he was making items." She snapped her head up as if remembering Vo was standing there. "Well, be on your way." She shut the door as she turned away, and Vo heard the bolt lock. Knowing where Sala lived now bolstered Vo in case something happened to Inleos, so she decided to head back to her room with the cash she just earned. She checked often to see if somebody was following her. Vo even made cutbacks and went into shops to take away any threats. In one such shop, she cast Detect Magic on the coin and pouch given to her. Neither were magical, but she made it back to the inn with no issue, and with a little bit more coin in her pocket. This concludes parts 4 and 5 of Chapter 1, where Vo returned to Ptolus of Ptolus, Tales Under the Spire. Please subscribe to the channel so that you can see more of these. I also have these now available on Spotify and Google Podcasts, and I'm working on increasing them in more places. Let me know what you think of this new layout. If you're listening to the podcast, you won't be able to see this, but obviously on YouTube, you'll be able to see that there's me here on the left-hand side, and then I'm trying to show the screen to the right to give you all just at least a little bit more of a visual for what's going on. I have to be careful not to show too much in terms of I don't want to just give away Monte Cook's intellectual property, but I know the map is public, so that's okay. And I'll try and share a little bit more in terms of just giving you guys some visuals to go along with the story. I always appreciate your feedback, even constructive criticism. I am just starting to do this, and we've got a long road to go, hopefully, in terms of this is a very long story. We're only to part 5 of Chapter 1, and we are currently about to finish up Chapter 8. So there's a lot of content yet to come. I try to post these every Tuesday. Follow there and join the website if you are a DM or narrator for Ptolus and you can prove that you own the material. If you're interested in Ptolus, we also have a Ptolus-only Discord channel, so check that out. And absolutely no pressure, but I do have a Patreon channel. If you feel like supporting me there as well, I'd greatly appreciate it. Patreons do normally get access to these recordings a week before everybody else as a perk for them. Other than that, I'm not doing any specific Patreon rewards at this time. Thank you so much for listening, and until next time, I hope you stay out of the shadow of the Spire.